Why am I interested in this, just before I begin? Well, it's very simple. The dark areas of the map show the parts of the world that are largely populated by Muslims or where Islamic socio-cultural values are preeminent. It's a very large part of the world. It's certainly one of the most populous categories of human existence. So it is fantastically foolish of any scholar of something as universal as entrepreneurship not to try to understand how these socio-cultural values in this large part of the planet Earth matter for our understanding of entrepreneurship. People ask me this all the time, why are you so interested in Islam? And I just find it astonishing that anyone would not understand that based on the simple demographics of where Islam matters in the world. Now, some of this map, it's a bit of an illusion to assume that all of Russia is partially Islamic. I mean, I think it's based on population data. Most of the Muslims in Russia are in a very small part of that area, pictured in a kind of medium blue. But nonetheless, I think you can see, certainly where the blue is darkest, that most of the people there represent an Islamic perspective. And so it's still an enormous number of people, and therefore very worth trying to understand that perspective. Oxford, particularly me and some of my other colleagues, we have recently begun to become very active in the Islamic world, and we are running entrepreneurship development programs in all of the countries mentioned here. I just 2 weeks ago was in Abu Dhabi. I've got to go to Bahrain next week. I spent a lot of time in Dubai, and most of my time most recently in Saudi Arabia. I have other colleagues who are working on leadership and entrepreneurship development programs in Syria, mainly because Mr. Said, who founded the Said Business School, is himself a Syrian. My research is based mainly in Pakistan, and originally I was trained as an historian of British India, and I have other colleagues who are very active, particularly with women entrepreneurs in Bangladesh. We've recently begun exploring some research and training opportunities in Brunei, and I'm having some conversations about doing work in Indonesia, and of course, far more importantly than all these little places, there is Malaysia. This represents for me one of the most insightful windows on how Islamic cultural values are active in entrepreneurship. There's something about the mixture of the Islamic perspective and the traditional understanding that is held in the West of entrepreneurship that is much more successful here in Malaysia than I've seen in any of those other countries mentioned. Now, what is it about what you're doing that's so significant? Well, before I turn to that, let me just quickly mention something of what we've been doing in Saudi Arabia, just to show you that it's a little different than what I think would be appropriate here. The Saudis have a very, very, very different approach to life. I don't know if anyone in the room is a Saudi, but I think you'd agree, and the rest of us would agree, that Saudis have a different way of going through the world than many other people. And one of the things that I've learned in many visits there and much time spent developing entrepreneurial training programs is that they are not used to competition. They don't do competition very well. Most people in Saudi Arabia who have had an education or who are involved in business activity are generally handed a lot of resources and don't have to compete for them. They also have a sufficiently small population that everyone can have a share, well, everyone in the right categories of that population can have a share of the benefits. So their attitude towards how to do business and how to organize business are largely conditioned by this fact, that competition is not a particularly important element. So when we've organized entrepreneurial development activity for Saudi Arabia, you might notice here there's not much competition built into the system. Just here at the bottom, there's a little bit, but it's an illusion because these competitions that we have set up for them are not real competitions. Everybody wins. Pretty much everyone gets first prize. Pretty much everyone's business is considered to be fantastic, and no one loses face, and everything is happy at the end. Now, I was talking earlier with some of your colleagues about how that's not the right approach for Malaysia. Here you have a healthy understanding of competition. You compete internally in the Johor Corporation. You are used to competition externally. Competition is regarded as a necessary, vital, energizing element of business activity generally and entrepreneurial activity specifically. Without it, you wouldn't really progress. Now that's therefore a much more, I think, consistent attitude with the understanding of entrepreneurship that I was elaborating earlier. The model that we've had to develop for Saudi Arabia is a little artificial. And I think here we have opportunities to understand the interplay of your sociocultural values because they are respective of competition. Now, here's where I'm beginning to stand on what for me is shaky ground, but with, concepts that are second nature to all of you. It seems to me that your understanding of the distribution of risk and profit inside a venture and the relationship between the people who provide resources and the people who use those resources is essentially different because of these two concepts. Now, I hope I've spelled them in a way that you can recognize what I mean by them.